We see a girl being attacked by her nymph. She wonders why he's doing this, and she slaps his face, removing his mask so she realizes that he's a different person. He pulls a knife and cuts her dress as she realizes he's a sorcerer, but Zahn suddenly grabs him, saying he was trying to sleep, but he heard people screaming. In his yard, the man realizes that he's also a sorcerer and that this is his territory, so he drops the knife and offers to share his research, but Zen isn't interested, so he blows his head off, but the blood splatters on the girl, and she faints from the shock. Zen realizes he messed up, thinking she'll be traumatized when she wakes up, so he decides to use his reverse magic. The spell only returns everything to its original state, but since the blood is gone, she's gonna think it was all just a dream. He notices her pendant and realizes she's with the church, who are the enemies of sorcerers, so he thinks she'll blame him for the attack. When she wakes up, he decides to leave her on the road and creates a teleportation circle, but someone interferes, and he thinks a regular sorcerer wouldn't be able to do this in his territory. There's someone who appears, and he realizes it's Barbad. So he asks him not to interfere with his casting circles. Barbados wonders what's happening, so Zahn explains that he's just punishing a creep in his garden, but Barbados thinks he's being a hypocrite, saying they're also bad people because sorcerers only respect their own desire for power. Barbados notices the girl lying on the ground, realizing she has a good amount of mana, so he wonders if Zahn will sacrifice her, but he explains that sacrificial sorcery isn't his style, and he teleports the girl, but Barbados thinks it's a waste. Zahn decides to go back to sleep, explaining that he was reading all night, so Barbados suggests fixing his problem with an adrenaline in the brain, but Zahn doesn't want to end up like him. Barbados mentions that this is basic sorcery and body manipulation is how they manage to prolong their lives despite having a limit of 1,000 years. He changes the subject and explains that he has interesting news, revealing that the archdemon Mariosa has died. We learned that the title of archdemon grants a huge amount of mana along with the authority to command lower-ranked sorcerers, so archdemons are considered as the pinnacle of sorcery, and Mariosa was the oldest among them since he was able to survive for over a millennium. Barbados reveals that there will be an auction in Mario's territory, and the items he acquired during his lifetime will be put on sale, so Barbados thinks it's going to be interesting. They head to the auction, but Zahn realizes that Barbados wants to borrow money from him, so he thinks about buying the archdemon's legacy alone. Barbados thinks that would be unfair because he told Zahn about the auction, and he offers to introduce girls to him in exchange for his help, so he becomes interested but thinks they will bring too much trouble. He sees the guards agitated, and Barbados mentions that there are kidnappers targeting young girls for experiments. Zahn thinks they're trying to summon something but realizes it sounds ridiculous. Barbados wonders if Zahn is one of the suspects in the kidnappings, but he thinks sacrificial sorcery isn't practical and things would have to be pretty bad to reach that point. They arrive at the auction and they see famous sorcerers in the area who have prestigious titles. Zahn wonders if they're powerful, and Barbados confirms this, saying they're also candidates for the archdemon position left by Mariosa, which will be decided by the other archdemons. The sorcerers notice them and reveal that the two are also candidates, even though Zahn is young, so he doesn't have a title yet. The host begins to present the merchandise, and Zahn imagines it could be used as a catalyst. They remove the cloak, revealing that it's an elf, a legendary race from the distant land of Norden. Zahn is taken aback by her, and the host explains that she's extremely rare because elves aren't usually born with white hair. He starts the bidding at 10,000, but Zahn suddenly offers 10 million, leaving everyone shocked. Barbados thinks he's crazy, and he wonders what he's feeling in his chest, thinking she's beautiful. He mentions that he found something he wasn't looking for, but Barbados wonders what kind of sorcery he plans to use her for. Zahn approaches her but wonders what he should say, and he asks about the collar, so the host explains that it's to restrain her mana, but none of them can remove it. He wonders if she's under a spell, but the host explains that she isn't, since normal magic isn't effective against her. He wants to hear her voice, but he ends up saying that he wants to hear the sweet sound she makes, so he comes off as a creep. Zen takes her to his castle, but he doesn't know what to say to her, so he tries to imagine scenarios, but it always seems wrong. He realizes that the castle doesn't look very pleasing for a girl, thinking he should have cleaned up before bringing her. She suddenly starts talking, and he thinks she sounds like an angel. She asks how she's going to die because she wants to prepare for her death, but he explains that he isn't going to kill her because he needs her alive, and she sees the torture device, so she thinks he's going to make her suffer. Zahn is shocked Revealing that the things belonged to the old owner, but he didn't bother to remove them. He introduces himself to her, explaining that he isn't interested in torturing her, and he blames himself for not knowing how to talk to her. She reveals that her name is Nylia, but she doesn't have a family name, and she tells him to call her Nephi. He thinks she has a beautiful name and asks if it's normal for elves not to have a family name, but Nephi reveals it's because she was a cursed child. She suddenly stands up and tells him not to worry because she has maintained her chastity, so she's still valuable for experiments. He becomes nervous, and he explains that he has no intention of experimenting on her, so she wonders why he bought her, but he can't explain what he's feeling, so he says that it's none of her business, but he doesn't understand why he keeps talking like that. He can't say that he fell in love and spent all his fortune on her, because he would look like a huge simp. He remembers that a sorcerer must always maintain composure, so he walks up to her and mentions that he'll provide her with a room, asking her to choose the one she likes best, but she misunderstands, thinking he's asking her to choose where she wants to die, so he tells her he isn't going to hurt her. He remembers that she was kidnapped and sold as a slave, so it's natural for her to think this way. He doesn't know what she means by cursed child, thinking she doesn't have a home to return to, so he realizes she's just like him. We learned that he used to live in the dumpster and he had to steal food to survive because he didn't have parents to look after him. He explains that he bought her because he needs her and tells her not to talk about dying. She seems confused, so he explains that she needs to live for his sake, and she agrees to this. They start looking for room, and Zahn thinks a place with a nice view would be good for her. He asks Nephi if she's afraid of heights, but she tells him to feel free to hang her as he wishes, so he scolds her for thinking about torture again. They climb the stairs and Nephi almost slips, but Zahn catches her, telling her to be careful, and he starts holding her hand, but he becomes embarrassed. They reach a room, but there's a guillotine inside, so he closes the door, but she explains that he can cut her head off. He asks her to stop, telling her it's a trap to protect the castle from aerial attacks, but he realizes that his explanation sounds ridiculous. He summons a spell and throws it into the room, destroying everything inside, but Nephi is startled. Since she has never seen such destructive sorcery, they enter the room, and Zahn thinks Nephi can't stay there, but she goes to the balcony and watches the moon. She says she wants to stay in that room because it was prepared by her master, so he grants her permission, saying she can use it as she sees fit. The next day we see that Zahn wasn't able to sleep because he kept looking at Nephi. He knows that her room wasn't good enough for her to sleep in, so he let her sleep in his room, but his imagination ran wild. After she wakes up, he brings her breakfast and she greets him, but he freezes because he doesn't know what to say, so he just gives her the food. Thinking he's a failure, they eat together, but Nephi wonders why Zahn is eating the food meant for slaves. He wonders if the food is plain, and she admits it is, but she seems more concerned than angry. He realizes it's not normal to eat this kind of food, but it's what he has always eaten, so he never thought about it. He wonders what normal people eat, so she decides to cook for him. He's taken aback by this and imagines her cooking for him, so he decides to go grocery shopping. They're about to ride a carriage to head to the city, but Zahn remembers that he's broke because he spent everything at the auction, so he decides to walk and wonders if he should have robbed the driver, but Nephi might think bad of him. He thinks about selling the castle and running a restaurant with Nephi, but they suddenly see the driver being robbed. He notes that she's afraid, realizing she was also kidnapped, so he tells her to watch closely as he attacks the bandits, so they wonder what a sorcerer is doing there. They attack him, and he decides to show her they aren't a threat by casually catching the man's axe. He tells the bandit that he shouldn't attack a sorcerer using brute force, shattering his weapon and pushing him away, but a hired sorcerer appears, and he finds it strange that Zahn is helping others, saying he made a promise to help the bandits, so he needs to get rid of Zahn. He uses flames to create a magic circle, but Zen controls it, using it to summon a lightning bolt, which completely obliterates him. Zahn challenges the other bandits to fight him, but they run away, and Nephi seems scared, so he thinks he overdid it. He explains that the bandits are harmless, but she reminds him that they just attacked a carriage, and the people start laughing as they thank him for saving them. The coach driver offers him money to protect his carriage, and he realizes that he can make a fortune by helping out others, but he recalls that sorcerers have a bad reputation and he always dealt with bandits, but he was never thanked for it, so he realizes that the people like him because he's traveling with Nephi. They continue the trip, and Nephi wonders why he helped the people. He thinks about how it was unintentional because he just wanted to show her that she doesn't need to be afraid of bandits. But he thinks it's an opportunity to impress her, so he says it was to put the dirt in its place, but he wonders why he keeps speaking nonsense. They finally arrive in the city to buy groceries, but Zen decides to buy items for Neffy first. He wonders what a girl needs, and they head to a clothing store, but the attendant Manuel isn't happy to see a sorcerer in her store. He tells her to find something Neffy can wear, and Manuela finds her pretty, but she notices the collar she's wearing, so he realizes that it attracts attention. They try on some clothes, but Manua picks a spicy outfit, so Zan is shocked and he criticizes her, so she explains that she was just trying to meet his expectations, and Neffy is embarrassed, so she tells him not to look. He asks Manuel to look for other clothes, so she shows him a Silk M's outfit, which includes magical boots with healing properties. Zan asks her what she thinks of the clothes, and Neffy says she'll accept anything, but he warns her to be careful or Manuel might show another weird outfit, so she tells him she likes us. They leave the store, and on the way out Manua goes up to Neffy telling her she's lucky to have a master who cares for her. They go to the next store, and the attendant also seems wary of seeing a sorcerer. Zan asks him if he can remove the collar, and Neffy is surprised, so he explains that it makes her look like the property of the archdemon Mariosa, but the attendant realizes it's enchanted, so he can't do anything about it. He explains that the collar has a trap, thinking her head would come off if he tried to remove it, so Zan needs to use the original key. He recalls that no one at the auction had it, so he thinks it must still be in Mario's castle. He pays the attendant, but he explains that he can't accept the payment because Zan once saved him when his carriage was attacked. He and his daughter ended up running away in fear, so he apologizes for this, but Zan doesn't even remember that they leave the store. But Zan wonders why everyone is being so friendly with him, thinking it's because of Neffy, and the attendant notes that he doesn't seem as scary as before. They continue shopping but only finish at sunset, so they decide to eat at a bar. Neffy wonders if Zan really wants to remove the collar from her, saying she'll be able to run away from him after it's gone, so he becomes worried thinking about it, but he explains that she shouldn't get her hopes up because removing it is going to be difficult, but he blames himself for being rude again. He notices that she's struggling to eat, and she explains that she has never used cutlery before, so he finally realizes why he felt connected when he saw her, thinking it's because she's just like him. She messes up with the fork, so she decides to use the spoon, and she finally manages to eat. He asks her what she thinks of the food, so she praises the dish, and he decides to eat, but he also struggles with the fork, so Neffy tries to feed him, but Zan is embarrassed because she's using the spoon she ate from, and they both turn red. She notices that he doesn't usually give her orders, so she asks for permission to serve him. Without asking, he allows it, and he feeds her in return, but they realize that everyone is watching them. We meet a knight named Chili, who can't believe that she was saved by a sorcerer. She recalls that they were hunting a group of sorcerers who were attacking young women, and on her way back home she was suddenly attacked by one of the angelic knights. She realized that he was one of the face thieves, but Zagan suddenly appeared to save her, and she noticed that he looked lonely. A priest approaches her, and she tells him that the operation failed as they lost 4 of the angelic knights, but he tells her not to blame herself, reminding her that she was able to avenge her brothers, but he believes the problem isn't over yet, telling her that Zan is responsible for the kidnapping. She can't believe this, thinking there must be a mistake, but the priest reminds her that all sorcerers are evil, so Zan must be put on trial. Even if he isn't guilty, she volunteers to deal with him, and the priest is pleased to hear this, calling her the captain of the angelic knights. We see Zan as a child being tortured by a sorcerer who creates a magic circle, but Zan copies it. He wakes up from his dream as Neffy tells him that breakfast is ready, and he remembers to say good morning to her. He realizes that she transformed the dining room, and he recalls that it used to look like a cemetery. He wonders if she bought bread, but she explains that she made it from scratch, so he praises her, and she seems happy. He asks her to join him, but she explains that she forgot to make enough food for both of them, and she doesn't have a chair. He suggests sitting on his lap, but is embarrassed by this, and she blushes but obeys the request, and he can't believe this is actually happening. He shares the bread with her, but she thinks he's being mean, saying it's embarrassing. Days later, we see Zan reading books, and Neffy asks him what he's studying. He explains that it's sorcery, and she doesn't understand the meaning of the circles, so he wonders if Elven sorcery is different, but she explains that she can't use sorcery, and he finds it strange since she has a law of mana. He explains that each symbol holds power, and there's still debate about what the symbols mean, but they're used in the blueprint of sorcery, the magical circuit he channels mana into. The circle creating electric sparks, and he mentions he can also add symbols to increase the spell's potency, and he demonstrates it summoning a lightning bolt. He reveals that anyone can channel mana and activate the circle, so they place restrictions to prevent another sorcerer from stealing it, and the construct tie-in of these circles are called circuits. She wonders if she can make circles within a circuit, and he admits that it's an interesting idea, but to do this requires a second magic circle within the first, and doing it would disrupt the flow of mana, so perfect flow control is needed to make it work. This would allow overriding someone else's sorcery, which means that the person would be able to ward off any magical attack, resulting in the most powerful sorcery of all. But Zahn explains that all this is just theoretical, saying it's nearly impossible to do it. Nephi understands and asks him if anyone can use sorcery if they know how it works. He's impressed with her and mentions that she's correct, saying knowledge is directly related to power and sorcery. He reveals that he has traps in the castle to prevent the knowledge from being stolen, so she should be careful not to touch anything. So she becomes worried, but he tells her it's just a joke since only invaders activate the traps. She asks him why he wants so much power. So he tells her he needs it to survive. He explains that he was poor when he was a child, and one day he was captured by a sorcerer who tried to sacrifice him, but he was able to reverse the spell, and he learned that he needs to be strong to stay alive. Nephi starts to think she's weak, so he tries to calm her, but he suddenly senses people invading his territory, so he tells her to prepare dinner while he goes to deal with the visitors. Chazal approaches the castle with her knights, and they feel like they're walking in circles, so she thinks it's because of a protective barrier. She decides to handle it and pulls out her sword, breaking the barrier around the castle, but Zahn appears to challenge them. He recognizes the holy sword, knowing it's one of the 12 swords that defeated the Lord of Fiends, but he wonders why a young girl is holding it and realizes she looks familiar. He remembers her, so he regrets letting her go since she appears to be one of the angelic knights, and he launches the first attack, but a knight protects her. He attacks Zahn, but he breaks the man's armor, sending him flying. Another knight charges in, but Zen easily breaks his sword and knocks him out before stepping on his face. Chastel prepares to fight, but Zahn warns her that he can crush the man's head faster than she can draw her sword. He explains that he would prefer to keep them alive because he wants them to tell the church what happened so that everyone will fear him, but she thinks he's lying, and we learn that Zahn doesn't want to kill them because he doesn't want to scare nephew with their bodies. Chastel is determined to kill him, and he creates a circle, but she strikes it and it ends up breaking, but he still thinks she's weak, and he continues to dodge her attacks. She calls him a coward, but he explains that he doesn't like hitting Lemon, and we learn that she reminds him of Nephi. She mentions that sorcery is evil, thinking it causes suffering for the people, but he thinks she's a hypocrite for attacking someone who hasn't done anything. She attacks him, so he catches her sword with a circle, but she lifts him off the ground and throws him away. He realizes she was holding back, and the holy sword is interfering with his healing. She swings her sword, so he grabs it, but she suddenly tells him to pretend he's dead. She explains that if she's defeated, a stronger knight will appear, so he needs to pretend to be dead and abandon sorcery. He wonders why an angelic knight is saying this, so she explains that he seems like a compassionate person. Knowing he saved her life, he realizes that she's risking going against the church by helping him, but he can't leave Nephi alone. Nephi suddenly leaves the castle, and he yells for her to come back, but a knight throws his spear at her, so he steps in and takes the blow for her. He tells her to escape, but he suddenly senses something as the trees begin to tremble, and Nay starts controlling them. She manages to trap the knight, but Zahn stops her, and we see that everyone's afraid of her power. That evening, Zahn recalls how the knights fled, and he asks Nephi why she said she doesn't use magic, but she explains that she didn't use sorcery, wondering if he finds her unsettling, so he explains that he doesn't, but he reveals that he has never seen this power before, and admits he's curious, so she tells him that the power is called mysticism. He remembers hearing about it, knowing it's a power that doesn't fit into logic like sorcery, and it allows the user to access powers beyond natural laws just by wishing. He wonders if all elves can use this power, but she explains it's because she's a cursed white-haired child. We learned that everyone in her village despised her because children with white hair aren't supposed to be born, but one day they were attacked, so they asked her to use her powers to help them as a reward for letting her live. She felt devastated, So she surrendered without resisting while the others ran away and they all ended up dead, but she explains that she liked it and thought they all deserved it because they made her suffer. She apologizes thinking Zahn is disappointed in her, but he confesses he would have killed the entire village along with the attackers. She thinks the people in her village will never forgive her, but he reminds her that they're already dead, saying it doesn't matter. He explains that those with power should live life strongly and not doing so is an insult to those who died. He thinks there's nothing wrong with wanting to be strong and encourages her to seek more power, telling her that people called him evil. He remembers when he saved a girl from bandits and advised her to become stronger to survive, but the girl told him that weak people also have the right to live. He thinks the girl ended up weak because she never used her strength for anything, so unlike her, he decided to seek power at all costs. He goes to Nefi, telling her he needs her, but she wonders if she has permission to continue living there, so he confirms this, saying he can't imagine living without her, and she starts crying. She apologizes for being too emotional and he notes that it's the first time she has talked so much. She changes the subject and asks him if his hands still hurt, but he realizes the pain is gone and his hands are healed, thinking it happened when he touched her. He looks surprised and thanks her for healing him, so she's taken a since it's the first time he thanked her. He apologizes for not doing it before, but she tells him it's okay because he's her master. They go to sleep, but Nefi asks Zahn if they can sleep together, but he isn't sure how to respond, wondering if she understands what she just said. She explains that there's only one bed in the castle, and since he only sleeps in a chair, she wants to leave the bed for him. He realizes she just wants him to sleep well, so he thanks her for her concern but decides to stay where he is because that's where the central point of his barriers is located, so it's important for him to stay in that room. She offers her lap for him to lay his head on, and he sees her enthusiasm, so he accepts but feels awkward since he can't see her face. He wonders why she's behaving differently, so she explains that he allowed her to stay after learning about her mysticism and she's just trying to show gratitude, but he insists that she doesn't need to thank him, saying she always does a good job. He asks her if she wants to learn sorcery, and he isn't sure if it will help with mysticism, knowing she still can't control it, but sorcery will give her basic skills to defend herself. She hesitates, but he thinks she can surpass him, so she decides to accept, wanting to be even more useful to him, so he decides to take her as his apprentice, and he notes that he never imagined trusting his knowledge to another person. She remembers the story he told about the girl and how he didn't understand how the weak feel, but she realizes that despite his harsh words he seems sad when saying them, so she hugs him, telling him he isn't a bad person. The next day, Barbados visits Zahn, wondering how he survived after encountering the angelic knights since they had a holy sword. Barbados wonders if the maiden of the holy sword was weak, but Zahn denies this, saying she was powerful enough to destroy the barriers around the castle. Nephi suddenly appears to serve tea, and Barbados is surprised to see her, wondering if Zahn plans to use her as a sacrifice or keep her alive to serve him, but he corrects him, saying she's actually his apprentice, and Barbados doesn't understand, thinking he's using her to enhance his magic. Barbados thinks he expelled the angelic knights with Nephi's magic, saying that explains the mess in the yard. He wonders if Zahn wants to become an archdemon, but he only wants the key, though he admits that with the authority of an archdemon, fewer people would come after Nephi, but he knows the chances of being chosen are almost zero since he's only been a sorcerer for a decade while the others have been doing this for centuries, but he still thinks about securing the position in the future. He thanks Nephi for the tea, and Barbados asks him if he's gotten attached, but he explains that there's nothing strange about valuing his own apprentice, so Barbados thinks he's still too human and decides to leave. She asks him if Barbados is his friend, but he denies this, and we learn that he doesn't like being around him. He decides to repair the barriers damaged by the knights, taking Nephi with him to teach her the fundamentals of magic circles. She works hard on the lessons, and he realizes that having someone's company is more pleasant than he expected. Nephi also becomes more comfortable with him, but she's still struggling to control her mysticism. Zen reveals that she can now use intermediate spells, but thinks her collar is still a problem. A month after they started living together, a two-headed bird suddenly breaks his barrier. It delivers a note which mentions that the 12 archdemons are calling for him, so Zahn travels to the town of Kids, where the underground ruins used by the former archdemon Morosa is located. He finds the 12 archdemons waiting for him, and they comment that Zahn is still a child, telling him he'll be the youngest sorcerer ever Chosen, he feels pressured by their intense mana but says he'll leave if he was called just to be shown off. They reveal that he has been chosen to be the 13th archdemon, so he becomes surprised and they show him the old emblem of Morosa, which he now owns. He senses the incredible amount of mana coming from the emblem and understands why ordinary sorcerers don't stand a chance against archdemons. But he wonders why they chose him, knowing there are more powerful candidates, so they admit that his power is insignificant, but there's still no sorcerer in the world capable of killing him. They tell him that he was able to defeat a powerful sorcerer named Andres at the age of 8 by learning his spell through observation and adding even more value to it. They acknowledge that he's capable of creating entirely unique sorcery, and Zahn realizes they already know his secret weapon, and Archgon explains that Zahn's skills make other sorcerers surrender their magic to him, and the archdemons tell him that they have high expectations for his future, so they decided to make him one of them. He mentions that if what they're saying is true, he could take everything from them, but they just laugh at him, and a lady in white explains that they can take much more from him. They mention that the wrath of an archdemon is pure destruction, and he's about to enter a dark world where his memories in essence will be destroyed, but he already knows this, knowing the ultimate fate of a sorcerer is to become an archdemon or die in obscurity, but he wonders if he has the right to involve Nephi in this. So he declares that he has one condition before he joins them. They listen to his request and they accept it, so he agrees to become an archdemon. He returns to the castle and Nephi notices he's a bit different, so he reveals he has become an archdemon. He reveals that in becoming one he took over Mario's assets, including the key to her collar. He uses it to set her free, but he suddenly declares that she has no more use, sending her away, and this leaves her in shock. Nephi ends up on the streets aimless and confused, and she decides to return to the castle, but she sees her collar on the ground. Realizing that her master has really abandoned her, she begins to remember the times they spent together and realizes he lied when he said she will stay by his side. Chastel sees her moping, asking her if she's okay, and Chastel recognizes her as Zen's companion. She tells Chastel to end her life, but she refuses, so Nephi reminds her about her duty to eliminate sorcerers, and Nephi reveals that she's Zahn's apprentice. The villagers see them, thinking Nephi is getting bullied, so Manuel interferes, telling Chazal that she should be ashamed of herself. Everyone condemns her behavior, saying they hate angelic knights, so they want her to leave, but NFY defends her, telling them they got the wrong idea. The girls head to a tavern where Chazal explains herself, but Manuela doesn't believe her, so Nephi mentions that Chazal never harmed her. She explains that Chastel wasn't the knight who hurt Zahn, and she thinks about her companion Taurez, who is now afraid of plants because Nephi used a tree to trap him. The waitress gives her food, and Manuel explains that she will pay for it, so Nephi eats it, but she suddenly starts crying because she used to cook that dish for her master. She explains that Zahn abandoned her, and she doesn't understand why he did this, so Manuela asks her what happened before she got kicked out. She recalls that he just became an archdemon, and she asks them about the title, so Manua tells her about Mariosa, saying he used to maintain the peace in the town. She explains that young girls were kidnapped after he died, and the church caught the kidnappers, but Nephi wonders why the villagers hate the church, so she explains that everyone thinks they're corrupt because they're demanding a ridiculous amount of money as offering. Chazal feels ashamed, but Nephi thinks the villagers shouldn't blame her because she wasn't the one asking for money, so she realizes that Nephi is a great person. She reveals that the angelic knights were made to defeat the archdemons, and they were given holy swords for this purpose, but there are only 12 of them in existence. So she thinks the knights can't defeat the 13 archdemons. She adds that new archdemons are usually targeted by the church, hoping to defeat them before they can muster their strength, so Nephi realizes that Zahn is holding a dangerous title, thinking he left her to keep her safe. Chazal asks her if she thinks he's behind the kidnappings, but she denies this, knowing he isn't interested in weak people. Chazal agrees with her, thinking he is an evil, and she mentions that he looked lonely, so Nephi realizes that he needs her. She decides to return to him because she wants to support him, and Chasti is determined to clear his name because there's a sorcerer trying to frame him. Manuela tells Nephi to visit her if she needs help, but she wonders why Manuel is so kind to her, so she explains that it's because they're friends. Nephi reveals that she never had friends, so Manuela is happy to be the first one. And Chazal's companions suddenly arrive, but Taurus freaks out, realizing that Nephi is with her, but a dark energy suddenly surrounds them, so Manua flies away, and a voice claims that this is the work of Zahn, telling the knights to rescue the girls in his castle, so the knights decide to attack Zahn, but they end up falling for his trap, and he blames them for being careless. He recalls that he made the trap with Neffy, and we learn that he wants to stay away from her because he's trying to keep her safe, knowing the church is going to hunt him down. He's about to leave, but a knight stops him, telling him to spare Chasti because she's trying to clear his name. Menth suddenly arrives, and she starts arguing with the knight, saying Zahn is innocent. She tells him that Neffy and Chastel have been kidnapped, and he can't believe this is happening. Thinking he has failed, Nephi Menel begs him to save them, but he thinks about the consequences, knowing the church will hunt Neffy if they find out she's his apprentice, but Manuela tells him that she wanted to stay with him and he broke her heart by ordering her to leave, so he realizes he messed up. He admits that he was being selfish, thinking he's just as bad as the other sorcerers, and he promises to save Nephi. He creates a magic circle saying he's about to leave, but everyone wants to join him, so he allows them to tag along. He explains that he knows who the kidnapper is, saying it's also a sorcerer, and he activates the magic circle. We cut to Neffy as she realizes that her restraints are sealing her magic, and she thinks about using mysticism, but she notes that there are no plants in the area. We learned that Barbados is the kidnapper, but she wonders why he's doing this because she thought he was Zahn's friend, so he explains that sorcerers don't have friends, and he reveals that he was the student of Andres, but he's not doing this to get revenge, saying he wanted to kill Andres himself, but he reveals that he's jealous because Zahn took everything from Andres thinking it was supposed to belong to him, so he tried to use the church to kill Zahn, and Chastau realizes he's the one behind the kidnappings, but he explains that the face stealer started the sacrifice business and he just needed girls to perform a major ritual which will convince the archdemons that he deserves to be one of them. He mentions that Neffy will make an excellent sacrifice because she has an incredible amount of mana, but she explains that he can't become an archdemon because Zahn has already occupied the vacant spot, so he becomes devastated thinking Zahn is taking everything from him, so he drags her to a magic circle planning to complete the ritual because he thinks he can still take the title from Zahn. Chazal tells him to sacrifice her instead, but he refuses, saying Neffy is a better tool for the sacrifice. Hearing this, she realizes that everyone has been using her and Zen was the only one who treated her with respect, so she tries to exist because she wants to be reunited with him, but Barbados overpowers her, and he threatens to attack her, telling her she's just a slave. But there's suddenly an explosion as Zahn arrives, saying he's going to rescue his apprentice. He knows that Barbados has been plotting against him, saying his suspicions began when he saw the face stealer in his territory. He knew that the face stealer was too weak to get past his barrier, so he suspected that Barbados was involved because he had the habit of breaking into his territory. Barbados wonders why he was playing dumb, so he explains that he wanted to understand why Barbados was doing this, but he realizes that Neffy got hurt, so he charges in and he attacks Barbados, targeting his limbs. Zen frees Neffy, asking her if she's okay, but she explains that she was worried about him because she knows he's lonely, so she wants to be with him. Barbados gets back up and he starts casting spells, but the magic circles disappear, so Neffy wonders what's happening. Zen reveals that he knows a trick which allows him to override sorcery, saying he can cancel spells by copying the magic circles. Barbados thinks he inherited this power from Andres, but he denies this, saying he learned it when Andres tried to kill him. He explains that after he was captured, he saw Andres using a magic circle, so he used his blood to draw it on his hand, and he tried to escape, but Andres caught him, and he tried to use magic, but Zen reached out his hand and he was able to counter the SP felt by accident. Barbados creates countless magic circles, but Zahn destroys all of them, so he becomes surprised, wondering how Zahn was able to counter spells that he has never seen before, but he tells Barbados that the spells are basic, revealing that he spent years learning how to improve magic. During that period, Zahn stayed in the castle, and Barbados kept visiting him, inviting him to have fun together, but Barbados explains that he just wanted to spy on Zen. He explains that he can converted the magic circles into enhancement magic, revealing that he has acquired a title after he became an archdemon, and we learn that he's now called the Sorcerer Slayer. He fires a powerful energy beam and it hits Barbados, causing him to collapse, and he realizes he's no match, so he admits defeat and he starts begging for his life, but Zahn approaches him, so he thinks he's going to die, reminding him that they're friends, but He explains that sorcerers don't need friends and he charges up his fist before delivering the finishing blow, but we see that he spared Barbados and he reveals that he was just fooling around telling Barbados to buy him a drink. Barbados becomes upset realizing that Zahn showed him mercy, so he promises to get revenge, but Zahn doesn't care as long. As he receives free drinks, Barbados thinks he's crazy, but he explains that he's going to do whatever he wants. Because he needs to control the world to give Neffy a good life. Baird's magic circle suddenly activates and Zahn asks him what he's doing, but he explains that he didn't do it, and Zahn realizes that he activated it when he punched the ground. A dark energy appears as he senses a strange presence, and Barbados explains that he was planning to summon a true demon. We learned that demons used to roam the world during ancient times, but they suddenly disappeared, and there's no proof that they ever existed, but there are rumors that they came up with the symbols used in sorcery. Everyone's frightened as the demon takes form, and Zahn recognizes it as a shadow, wondering how it was summoned without a sacrifice. It glares at him, and he senses an intense magical pressure, realizing they don't stand a chance against it because demons are far stronger than humans, but it suddenly bows to him, recognizing him as its master, and he realizes it's because of his archdemon emblem, so he orders it to leave and it returns to the magic circle, but after it disappears the cave suddenly starts collapsing, so Zahn carries the girls away and Barbados grabs onto him as he takes them to the exit, which is about to be sealed by the falling rocks, but Chazal's companions arrive helping them escape, but they tell him that saving her is their priority and he just happened to be with her when the cave was collapsing. They decide to leave and Manuela thanks Zahn for saving her, but she advises him to work things out with Neffy before flying away. He asks Barbados if he wants to keep fighting, but he knows he doesn't stand a chance, so he decides to buy liquor to make amends and he teleports away. Neffy tells Zahn that she wants to stay with him, but he explains that something needs to change, telling her to stop calling him master, and he tries to tell her that he loves her, but he realizes that he can't, so he just tells her he wants to be with her until the day he dies, and this makes her happy. She shows him her collar, saying she wants to keep wearing it because it reminds her of the moment they first met, so he puts it around her neck thinking it's like an engagement ring. She asks him about the nature of their relationship because he's no longer her master, but this makes him nervous because he doesn't know how to answer the question. We see the villagers talking about Zahn recognizing him as the new archdemon, and the sorcerer named Kamari overhears them, so he asks the sorceress Gry if she's okay with it because he was expecting her to be chosen as the new archdemon, but she doesn't seem to care, telling him that things are about to change at the church. The priest reprimands Chasti because she refuses to hunt Zahn, knowing he saved her life twice. She explains that Zahn is innocent, but the priest tells her she's going against the church by defending a sorcerer, and he decides to remove her from her position. Her companions try to defend her, begging him to reconsider, but she stops them, and she thinks about Zahn wanting to be like him because he always fights for what he believes in. Chastel decides to surrender her holy sword because she wanted to use it to protect people, realizing that the church has turned her into their lapdog, but the priest tells her to cheer up, saying her punishment is only temporary because the holy sword has chosen her as its wielder. He tells her to be patient, but he warns her that he can only give her limited protection, and he reveals that the most notorious holy sword wielder, Raphael, is making his way to the town, so she becomes scared, thinking he's going to punish her. We see Zahn in his library as he thinks about the archdemon emblem, wondering how it was able to control the shadow, so he goes through Mario's books. But he can't find the answers he's looking for. Nay approaches him, realizing he's working hard on his research, and she tells him it's time for lunch. She gives him food, and he asks her where she learned a new recipe, so she reveals that Manuel taught her how to cook. They taste it, realizing it's delicious, and she shows him the pudding she made, so he tries it, and he can't believe how sweet it is, but someone breaks through his barrier, and he knows they have a visitor, but he decides to chill as a mysterious sorcerer enters his room. He recognizes the sorcerer as Ver, knowing he was also an archdemon candidate, and he reveals that he wants to steal Zahn's powers, but Zahn tells him to wait because he's still eating, saying he doesn't want the food to go to waste, but Ver uses his arm to attack, and Zahn manages to defend himself, but he notes that Ver isn't using sorcery. He prepared prepars to blast Zahn, but he becomes angry, so he pushes him back, knocking him down, but his head is removed, and Neffy realizes that Ver is a girl, so Zahn feels guilty, realizing he just harmed a girl, but Neffy tells him that Ver is still alive, so they decide to take care of her until she wakes up. They take her to the guest room where she regains consciousness, but she asks Zahn why he spared her life because she was planning to kill him, so he explains that Nephi saved her, saying he would have killed her if Nephi didn't stop him, and he asks her why she attacked him so. She explains that she wanted to steal his power, knowing he's the newest archdemon and he's known as the Sorcerer Slayer, so she thought she could defeat him if she didn't use sorcery. He knows that she used her racial abilities, calling her a dragon, but he realizes she's just a kid, and he recalls that he used to get into trouble for stealing food, so he decides to punish her, telling her to assist Nephi for a week because he wants to teach her how to behave, but she asks him if he's going to eat her because humans consume dragons to gain infinite mana, but he thinks this is just a legend, and he realizes that she hid her identity because she's afraid of humans, so he tells her he'll never eat her, and he recalls that he was always hungry as a kid, so he tells Nephi to prepare food for her. Ver is confused, wondering why they're taking care of her, so Zahn explains that he's doing it for charity, and she becomes upset thinking he's looking down on her, but he tells her not to waste food, so she starts eating, realizing that the food tastes amazing, and Zen heads to the library telling her to help Nephi. When she's done, she warns him that she could kill Nephi if she wanted to, but he explains that she doesn't stand a chance because Nephi is stronger than her, but we learn that Zahn is worried, so he decides to watch them as Nephi asks Phaler is she's afraid of him, so she mentions that he has immense power, knowing she doesn't stand a chance against him, but Nay assures her that he's a good person. She wonders why Nephi is following his orders, so she explains that he bought her, but he treats her with respect, so she wants to stay by his side. She asks Ver if she has someone important in her life, and she reveals that she doesn't, so Zahn realizes she's all alone, and he feels sorry for her. A few days later, we see that Ver is getting used to life in the castle, and Zahn still can't find the answers he's looking for, so he thinks about returning to Maros, his lair. Thinking he's hiding secrets because he seemed to be interested in true demons, he thinks the input of another sorcerer might be able to help him, and Ver tells him it's time for dinner. He walks past her as she warns him that she might attack him, but he tells her she can fight him whenever she's ready. While having dinner, Thur apologizes for interrupting him while he was eating, and he realizes she's starting to mature, so he decides to take her to Mario's castle. But she tells him that she could steal his knowledge as she joins him, thinking it's supposed to be kept a secret, but he explains that he doesn't care because knowledge is meant to be stolen anyway. She wonders why he isn't forcing her to obey him, and he tells her she's just a kid, so she deserves to enjoy her freedom. But she suddenly starts crying, so Zen cheers her up, telling her he's gonna protect her while she's with him. That evening we see Vale for sleeping, and Nephi thinks she's starting to feel comfortable around Zahn. He sees her holding a spin, so he tries to take it, but she grabs onto him, calling him her father, and Nephi is happy, telling him she's like their daughter, so he becomes flustered, and he thinks about having a family with Nephi, thinking it will make him happy. After some time, we see Vale for writing on her diary as she notes that she's been enjoying her life in the castle. Thinking it's strange because Nephi stares at Zahn whenever he's sleeping, Ver recalls that she once spied on them while they were in the library, and she saw them having an intimate moment, but they noticed her, so they became embarrassed. They for visits Manuela, who finds her cute, and Zahn buys clothes for her because he doesn't want her to wear her armor in public. She thanks him for the clothes, and she holds on to him as he notes that he feels strange, thinking he's starting to see her as his daughter. We see Chazal thinking about her decision to surrender her sword, and she's happy that she was able to delay the hunt for Zahn, but she wonders why she's doing this, knowing she can't be with him because he seems to be in a relationship with Nephi. She sees Zahn's group, and she's surprised to see Ver, thinking she's his daughter. Zahn denies this, and Ver asks him about Chazy, but he says he doesn't recognize her, so she starts crying, and Nephi reminds him who she is, saying she isn't wearing her armor, so he asks her why she's dressed as a civilian, and her companions arrive. But Ver prepares to strike them down, so he tells her to stop, saying the town isn't a good place to start a fight. The knights tell Chazal that the priest is looking for her, so they return to the church as Zahn asks Vil for why she wants to kill the knights, so she explains that they're the natural enemies of sorcerers, and he knows she has a point, but he's trying to avoid conflict. Zahn's group heads to Mario's castle, and Ver realizes that it smells familiar, thinking dragons used to live there, so Zahn asks her to find anything related to dragons, and they enter the castle. Ver sees a casting circle, telling Zahn that It contains draconic patterns, and she thinks it will allow them to access a hidden door. She activates it as he notes that Neffy appears to be jealous, so he rubs her head. As Ver tells them she has opened the hidden door, they head deeper into the castle, and they see Mario's library as Zahn mentions that they need to find books about the archdemon. Ver asks him if he can read people's minds because he knew that Neffy wanted him to rub her head, but he explains that he knows how to read her clues because they've been together for a while. She sees a strange book and she realizes that it's about the 12 holy swords. Zahn reads it and he sees the writing on the holy swords, realizing it looks similar to the symbols on his emblem, so he believes that the book has the answers he's looking for. At the church, we see Raphael approaching Chasti knowing she's been removed from her position, and he asks her how many sorcerers she has defeated, but she tells him that she doesn't want to brag about her numbers, and he finds her interesting, realizing she has an attitude, so he decides to kill her, but the priest arrives telling him to stop, and he recognizes him as Clawwell, calling him a bureaucrat. Raphael knows that he confiscated Chastel's sword, and we learn that a holy sword chooses its wielder, but it can't be used by anyone else until the chosen one dies. Raphael threatens to kill Chazal so that he can take her sword, and she thinks he's pathetic, so he prepares to strike her down, reminding Claw that she's defenseless because he confiscated her weapon, so he decides to return her sword, thinking it will keep her safe, but she notes that Raphael is about to leave, realizing he helped her retrieve her sword, and she sees a letter in her room. We cut to a tavern where we see Zahn drinking with Barbados, who laughs at him because he decided to adopt a girl. Barbados asks him about the girl, and Zahn reveals that he knows her, so he realizes she's a sorcerer, but he knows that there's only one female sorcerer in the town, and she hates men. He knows that Ver broke into Zahn's castle, but he thinks she's a man because he hasn't seen her without her armor. He mentions that she could be a dragon, and he thinks about using her body to create catalysts, so Zahn decides to keep her identity a secret. Barbados tells him he's in trouble because the church has sent Raphael, who has killed hundreds of sorcerers, and his next target is Zahn, but he can't believe a knight can be so powerful, and Barbados tells him about a rumor which mentions that Raphael has eaten a dragon, but Zahn wonders why Barbados is telling him about this, knowing he wants something in return, so he tells Zahn that he wants a portion of Mario's estate, but Zahn denies his request because he doesn't trust him, but he tells Barbados that he can have a few books. Raphael suddenly enters the tavern, and Zen sees Reflection asking Barbados what Raphael is supposed to look like, so he explains that Raphael has a huge scar on his face which was given to him by the dragon he defeated, and Zahn notes that he's standing right behind them. Barbados is shocked to see him, and everyone else runs away. Barbados prepares to fight, but his magic is cancelled by Zahn. Barbados wonders how he can be so calm, but he notes that he doesn't sense any blood lust coming from Raphael, so he invites him to join them. Zahn wonders what he wants, mentioning his hobby of killing sorcerers, but Raphael notes that he only snots out the embers that risk becoming an inferno. He asks about Zahn's fight with Chasti, wondering how she did against him, so he notes that she's the strongest person he's ever fought. Raphael thinks this makes her a threat to the church, but Zahn wonders what he means. He mentions how she objected to the church hunting him, so they have reason to dispose of her. Zahn can't believe she protected him, and Raphael decides to leave. Zahn realizes that Raphael came to confirm their relationship, and he was looking for a reason to kill Chazal, so he tells him the town is his territory and warns Raphael that if he steps out of line he will deal with him, but Raphael laughs and thinks he's an interesting archdemon. Zahn tells Barbados to check on Chazal since he can teleport. Barbados reminds him she's also an angelic knight, but he tells him he will give him extra books, so he teleports away. Zahn goes back to the castle, and he finds Neffy waiting up for him. He tells her she should have gone to bed, but she reveals it was Vor's idea to wait up for him. Zahn can't believe she's the one who fell asleep, but Neffy mentions she spent all day carrying Mario's books back to the castle. Zahn notes that there were a lot of books, but Neffy thinks Ver was happy since he told her she could stay with him for 1,000 years. Since dragons have long lives, he thinks about getting rid of Raphael before they get a chance to meet, and Neffy also wishes to stay with him for that kind of time, but he notes that she will obviously be there as well, and she promises to always be by his side. They share a moment together, and they are about to kiss, but Barbados suddenly interrupts them, and he gets pissed off, but Barbados reveals Chasi, and it seems she has been poisoned. Zahn asks for Nephi's help, so she rushes over, and Ver wakes up, but she sees Chastel's sword, realizing she's an angelic Night, so she transforms her arm and tries to attack, but Zahn stops her. He mentions Chazal is his guest, but Ver reveals she became a sorcerer to get revenge on the angelic knight. Zahn wonders if Chastel ever hurt her, so she reveals that someone with a sacred sword killed her father. Zahn notes that it was a different person, so getting revenge on Chazal would be meaningless and she would only make more enemies, which will make her revenge even harder in the future. Vale for wonders what he knows about revenge, so he notes that revenge is about making our targets suffer, driving them to despair and making them beg for death. Nephi and Vale for a shock to hear his explanation, and Vale for wonders if he has ever gotten revenge. He notes that he failed because he killed the person in an instant instead of making them suffer, so he didn't feel any better by doing it, telling her not to make the same mistake, and she ends up calming down. Chasta wakes up wondering where she is, and Zahn asks her if she remembers what happened. She recalls being summoned by a letter, and she met a mysterious person from the reconciliation faction in the church who believe in coexistence with sorcerers. He asked her to consider joining them and gave her the name Orbis, telling her to call out if she ever needs help. She thinks about joining as she heads back, but that's when she was poisoned by the tea. She wonders if it was Raphael who poisoned her, but Zahn thinks he could easily just cut her down. Zahn notes that since she's Nephi's friend, she's welcome to stay at the castle, but the next day we see her as a maid. As Zen notes, he said she could stay, but didn't say it would be for free. Ver glares at her and runs off, so she wonders if she offended her. Zahn mentions Valor's father to help her understand, so she wonders if she should leave, but Zahn thinks Ver won't do anything foolish. We hear Chastel screaming as we see a frog on her face. Zahn laughs at her, and it seems Ver has resorted to pranking her. He notes that she's still a child, but she throws more frogs at Chasey, causing her to fall over. After 10 days, we see Ver has continued to prank Ty, but even she is starting to feel bad since Chaz is so pathetic. New York apologizes for Vor's behavior, but she tells her it's okay. She thinks the bath is great, and Nephi notes that they often bathe together. Chazal is surprised hearing this, but Ni is talking about Ver, and she gets embarrassed when she realizes Chastel thought she was talking about Zahn. Zahn goes to see Ver, telling her to show restraint with her pranks. He asks if she wants to keep living with them, knowing she still has unfinished business, so he tells her that he and Nephi will always be waiting for her. In a flashback, we see Ver looking for her father, and we see that it was Raphael who killed him. She wakes up from her nightmare and she considers killing Astel, but she just ends up pinching her face. Instead, we see Zahn sleeping, but Nathi suddenly rushes in, telling him that Ver is gone. We see Ver writing in new part her diary as she notes that Zahn and Nephi asked her if she wants to be their daughter, and we learn that she's happy to be around them, so she wants to stay in the castle, but she can't stop thinking about revenge, thinking an angelic knight killed her father, so she decides to hunt down the killer. She heads to Mario's castle thinking she'll